Welcome, everybody, to David and Uzzah studying the Ark together, what the leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints should do. David Eaton is an active LDS old-timer who thinks he knows best. Go ahead, David.
So just to define one or two terms here, when we talk about church leaders, we're referring to the first presidency and the quorum of the 12 apostles in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. When we talk about Uzzah, we're talking about this fellow who was driving the oxen cart that was carrying the Ark of the Covenant. And Uzzah and his brother Ahio were tasked to remove the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. And unfortunately, there was a stumble on the way by one of the oxen, and Uzzah put up his hand to stop the Ark from toppling. And he was struck down. You can see him being struck down here. And he was killed. And so, in my presumptuous way, I am doing pretty much the same thing here. I'm thinking that maybe the Ark is toppling, and I'm going to try to steady the Ark. So don't get too close to me, just in case I get struck down here as we go through this. Also, why they left. So the background to this is that in 2023, I conducted a very small qualitative research study. I put up online a questionnaire which was entitled Why They Left, or Why Did You Leave? And it was posted onto 2 Facebook pages that were populated by people who had typically left the church. I was interested in understanding why they left and how leaving impacted them, or how that left them feeling. And very kindly, 111 people gave their reasons. And I compiled the data into a report. It went to 100+ pages, and I sent the report to my stake president, and he sent it to his area president. Well, he sent it to an area authority, Area 70, but I don't believe it went any further than that. And so I sent it to the senior president of the presidents of the 70.
Oh, wow.
And because I kind of knew him a little bit. And he wrote back, very nice email, and thanked me for it. And he also said, I noticed that you ask a number of questions after each section in your report. You ask a number of questions. And he said, I would be very interested, if you'd be willing, to hear your suggested answers to these questions. In fact, I think he said your prayerfully considered suggested answers. And I wrote back to him and said, I'd be happy to do that. And so I then compiled this second stage report for this senior church leader. And so I'm just going to whip, I can't whip through all of it because it's kind of big, but I'm just going to hit on some of the key points as we go through this. So it's not true. I learned so many things that I knew there was no place for me. I loved having callings, speaking, attending meetings, etc. But with what I knew, I wouldn't be able to be fully involved. I couldn't in good conscience continue to attend. So this is a quotation, and a direct quote from one of the respondents in the research study in 2023. This was a female baptized age 8, left church age 42 in 2020. And so this belies the assumptive. This is what I wrote. This is me here on the right on the left is what the individuals said in their response to the questionnaire. This belies the assumptive misconception that people leave the church casually or easily. For her, this was an act of conscience. This was her deliberately being true to herself. And then this was the questions that I had put up. Does this really need to be like this? What can we do? What can the church do to prevent these occurrences? And then, this is my presumptive suggestion to the church leaders. What can you do? Continuously teach that everyone, including church leaders, must curb our instinct for judgmentalism. Acknowledge that people who leave the church as an act of conscience do not do so casually. They will have taken their faith-trust dilemma to God in prayer. They concluded that in good conscience they could not continue to attend. Address head-on the faith-trust issues that are causing people to leave. The gospel topic essays are welcome but inadequate and have caused some people to leave the church. Leavers feel the church is being disingenuous in the way it is not forthrightly accepting responsibility for what occurred at the most senior levels of leadership. They hate the glossy light they feel the church is always trying to portray itself in. Leavers and remainers are livid that the church institutionally refuses to repent of its sins, never apologizes, but always expects its members to do both of those things. I might move around a bit just in case there's a bolt of lightning coming down. Leaders should consult with historians widely and ask them how we can make these essays more authentic, more congruent, filled with more integrity. When people read these essays, they should weep at the sheer honesty of them. I don't think that's happening too much at the moment. Until we write about the mistakes that have been made, the prophetic blunders perpetrated and the lives blighted because of them, offering fulsome apologies, we will never sound authentic, and people will continue to vote with their feet. I saw hate for LGBTQ people at all levels of the church. Holland's talk at BYU in August 2021 was the final straw for me. It was then I seriously questioned for the first time if I wanted to be here. Then I found the Mormon Stories commentary on the Holland talk, and there was enough stuff in it to break my shelf altogether. Female, maybe baptized age 8, left church age 31 in 2022. My questions to this senior church leader was, if members in the global church hang on every word leaders say, is it not incumbent on those leaders to choose very carefully the metaphors and words they deploy? And my question, only use words and metaphors that uplift and extol the sanctity of every child of our heavenly parents, irrespective of their gender identity. Sorry, that's not a question, that's my suggestive response to the question. The church's position, which is a little confusing, offers very little to no hope for those who are LGBTQ. They either abstain from any form of married family life or leave the church. The statement in the Family Proclamation, gender is an essential characteristic of individual premortal, mortal, and eternal identity and purpose, immediately others them. Every reference to it cuts them to the core. Two gay men who run a podcast in the States were talking about this last week, and one of them said that suicidal thoughts had returned to him after watching General Conference. October 2023, this is. It's difficult for cishet people like you and me and the Q15 to fully understand how this idea, which is taught as doctrine, can be so wounding to non-cishet people. In addition, I suggested the confusion comes when one sets the family proclamation statement alongside others, such as, even though individuals do not choose to have such attractions, they do choose how to respond to them. Quote from mormonsgay.org, a now defunct website, and that quote was picked up and quoted by Elder M. Russell Ballard. You can see the reference along the bottom there from a CES devotional by young adults, "Be still and know that I am God." If people do not have a choice as to who they are attracted to, then how can gender be an essential characteristic of eternal identity? Though gender and attraction are not the same thing, they are nevertheless integrally linked. For no man's land, or in other words, no married or family life for you in the church status for LGBTQ people is heart-wrenchingly awful for them. Reconciling the church's position on this and the teachings of Jesus Christ drives people to despair, disassociation, and sometimes death.
Would it be okay as we go just to discuss each one, because you're jumping
sure.
between topics, if that's all right, just so that we don't forget at the end. I mean, I think for me already, what I'm feeling so powerfully from this is you're not mincing your words. We're so used to everything, as you said earlier. The church can't do any wrong. It's all fluffy. It's fine. The gay people, and talking very vaguely in ways that can be interpreted 1,000 different ways or ignored about how to be compassionate to LGBTQ people, when it's very clear we're not changing the pathway for you. You will shove it down and get married heterosexually or stay celibate. You know, that's your only choices here. I just almost, it's just a comment of how used we are to incredibly manipulative and vague language, that simply the act of just saying this really hurts people. You know, it's not just a bit difficult, it's heart-wrenchingly awful. You know, what on earth are you doing this to people? Or how have we not showed more empathy for that? Do you get a sense when you've had communications with more senior people in the church that some of them realise that, how difficult it is, but feel they can't say so publicly, or that they don't really have a... Or do you feel it is still an empathy issue, that they just don't get how hard that is?
I think that's a fantastic question, and the answer is very multi-layered and quite complex, because obviously the people, we are all the product of our upbringing, our cultural backgrounds, etc., etc. And the present constitution of the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 Apostles are no different. They are the product of their upbringing, and so, although of course they receive revelation too. But one of the things that interested me was one of the comments from this senior church leader who I had sent the report to, was, he said, you would not be surprised to learn that the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 Apostles are looking at these issues all of the time, and they receive data similar to the data that you had provided in your report.
Of course, yeah.
So I took that positively and felt that, okay, that's great. I think they are obviously thinking about these things and constantly talking about these things. I imagine it would be great to be a fly on the wall in those meetings, but I imagine there is a lot of discussion and debate going on. So, yes, I think they're sensitive to these issues. I'm not sure how that will play out in the world. Bob?
Can I make a comment about the wider, sort of outside of the church? When I was taught counselling in my, we worked from the Mental Health Handbook 4, and in the Mental Health Handbook 4, there was a section, an whole section with regard to LGBTQ, and that it was a psychological problem. And so therefore it was looked at as a psychological problem, and it was felt that counselling and medication was the appropriate route so for people to escape from that psychological difficulty that they were in. And this was actually taught. And it was accepted because it was in the manual, it was accepted as being correct because this was written by the top psychologists, whatever, and it's only when the 5 came out that it disappeared completely. And so therefore, I mean, this is something for older people like myself, it was what was ingrained into us as part of our training. And so I've had no problem coming to it because, I mean, throughout my working life, I was dealing with this issue and the problems that people had with society in this issue, not just the church, but with society. And so consequently, I think that it's a question of catching up. For a lot of people in the older generation, there is difficulty catching up with where we've moved from those days. That's in my lifetime.
Can you just put a date on that, Bob, from 4 to 5? What are we talking?
I don't know the dates where they moved it, but I can find it. I'll have a look for it.
The authors of the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders decided at the end of 1973 to remove all references to homosexuality as a mental illness that can be cured. Edition 4, which our audience member referenced, was published with these changes in 1994.
Carrying on the same theme, this is the last, I think, the last slide on this particular subject. These are in the yellow, these are my suggestions to the church leaders, extremely presumptuously. What do I know and why on earth should anybody listen? And I quite get all of that. But these are my suggestions, because I was asked to make the suggestions by the church leader, so these are my suggestions. Church leaders must be completely open about where the gender statement in the family proclamation came from. Did it come from our heavenly parents? Or was it a reaction to the early 1990s clamour for same-sex marriage and the plethora of advocate excommunications in the years leading up to it being proclaimed in 1995? If it was the former, church leaders must painstakingly explain how and why our heavenly parents arranged for a significant portion of their offspring to enter mortality with same-sex attraction and or gender dysphoria. If it was the latter, church leaders should revise it, row back and say, actually, we don't know how the gender thing works completely. Furthermore, on the church's website, in answer to the question why the church doesn't just let LGBTQ people be, Elder Christofferson says, quote, all people need to improve and change in order to measure up to the standard of the gospel. Close quote. Because he is answering a direct question about LGBTQ people, his answer implies that the church believes LGBTQ people need to change and improve to measure up to the standards of the church. The implication is that until they stop being LGBTQ, they won't measure up. Change this.
I was, for the church, I was part of an organisation that counselled, LGBTQ people in an effort to help them, and there was lots of people who had actually sort of gone straight, if that's a good expression to use. I'm not sure whether it's actually woke to say that, but they married partners and they were coming on and giving, sort of documentary evidence that their marriages were stable and everything like that, just to prove that counselling did work. And so that was up to 2013. That was what we as professionals were taught, and that's what the church leaders would have been advised.
Yeah. Were you part of the LDS Family Services group?
Yes, I've been part right along, all the time since I've been a member.
Super.
Do you have any sense of long-term outcomes? Because there are lots of cases of people who did all that, going back generations, including someone my dad served with on his mission, but eventually it just couldn't hold anymore.
It didn't hold anymore. I mean, we knew that. I mean, before it came out in 2013, we knew it wasn't working.
Wow.
I mean, but we couldn't do anything about it because this was outside of the church. The church had no input whatsoever into this manual, and this is what's the thinking of professional psychologists.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so therefore, that would have been influencing the thinking of the 12.
That's a really helpful perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
We move to a different subject. SEC financial cheating, making members clean chapels and temples while possessing billions of dollars, building totally unnecessary temples to maintain tax status, sitting on all that cash that could end world hunger, a corporation, not a religion, close quote. This was a lady baptized at the age of 15. She left the church aged 60 in 2017. And she's part of the respondents who responded to the 2023 survey that we're kind of talking about a little bit today. So, and these are the questions that I wrote and sent in the report that I sent to the senior church leader. Why isn't the church more transparent over its finances? Is it hoarding money? Should it spend more on charitable causes? Why, as one person puts it, is the church making members clean chapels and temples while possessing billions of dollars? In connection with the SEC order, was the church engaged, as one person claims, in financial cheating? Do leaders of the church labor under any illusions over the extent to which its financial affairs and their own decision-making affect members' lives? In response to the request from the senior church leader, I gave my suggested answers to these questions. If church leaders want to arrest the outward flow of members, they must become better at both managing finances and talking about managing finances. Do the Q15, that's short code for the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. Do the Q15 know what members think about the way they handled the SEC situation earlier in the year? So this is going back to 2023. The SEC put up a fine to the church, 5 million, I think it was, because they had breached some of the regulations associated with what they were doing with their investments. Do they know that people left the church because of what they did and how they spoke about it? The spokesperson messaging process needs overhauling. The phrase, quote, "we consider the matter closed," close quote, probably accounted for a good proportion of those who upped and left. Do church leaders not appreciate how arrogant and patronizing that sounds? It's tantamount to saying, quote, "we did nothing wrong and there's nothing for you to see here. Just get on with whatever you're doing." In the context of the detailed SEC ruling, it also sounds dismissive, as if the ruling was of no significance.
I think though, but if they'd have looked into it, they'd have found out the problem was the church had been advised by its financial advisors to put their money into shell companies. Now, they only did what was advised by the professional advisors, and that money had already been paid, and the matter sorted out, and the matter removed from the shell. As soon as the church knew that it had been put into these shell companies, it wasn't illegal. They moved the money back out straight away.
Right. The fact that they put them in the shell companies was not the actual issue, because you can do that. You can make these shell companies.
It was a tax avoidance.
It was that they had. What they were doing though was they created the 13 companies, and the 13 companies were supposed to be autonomous companies. They're supposed to be operating individually and sending reports off. But they didn't do that. They did all the reporting centrally. And so that was the actual, it was quite a technicality, really. But that was the particular issue that the SEC picked them up on. But the SEC also did say to them that they had been advised that this was running counter to the SEC's regulations. They had been advised about that annually for some time, but they hadn't made the change until the SEC really pounced on them and made the change. What else should church leaders do, according to the highly presumptuous David Eaton? Well, they should. Member perception is that church leaders think it's none of the members' business what the church does with their tithing and other offerings. This is an unhealthy perception. Change it by having senior church leaders be much more open and inclusive in discussing how tithes and offerings are dispersed. Thank the members for their kindness and generosity and make them feel included and involved in what the church is doing. If church leaders have a plan regarding the billions, share it. Let the members know what the thinking is. If you conceal, assumptions will have a field day. Publish how much it costs to run the church each year and how much is in reserve to run the church in the coming 50 years. If you set out the thinking, you'll carry more with you than you'll lose. Either spend more on alleviating world hunger or set out the clear rationale for not doing that. Preferably spend more. If the church has more than $100 to $150 billion in reserves, then why not spend some of it on reversing the member chapel cleaning policy? Among some members, this is a source of great irritation. I'm married to one, by the way. And resentment, especially in units where attendances have dropped away and the burden falls on a few. Going back to paid janitors will provide employment for individuals in challenging cost of living times.
The message around that has been, as always, either sort of still convincing members that we're actually in poverty and we can't really afford janitors, that's an unnecessary luxury. There's still a lot who still believe that because they have no idea how much the church has. Or it's framed as, well, it's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. If we all do a rota, you only have to go once a month and work for a couple of hours. That's not really, so I think sometimes it can be hard to justify this irritation and rage that people feel over it, because on paper it sounds really fair, but that's the same with tithing. So it's the same sacrifice for everyone. Well, no, it's not. If you're extremely poor, 10% of your income means your children don't get fed, and no one above your pay level has that experience. That's different, materially. And so many families are running around serving in the church, not cleaning their own houses, but they're being expected to go and clean the chapel when they have so little time to do that. Is where I come from with it. I don't know. With all of these, it's so much. It seems so obvious what the solution should be, but we've tied ourselves up in knots for various reasons that you can't just have that conversation. Do you feel there are any forums where the leadership really, because what you're saying is you don't realise how much the members really resent this and how patronising you sound, and you're sort of acknowledging that they are getting this information in various ways. They do member opinion surveys quite regularly. Do you see any other mechanism whereby that conversation can happen, where the leaders can actually sit down with disgruntled members and really hear?
No.
Yeah.
Short answer is no. I don't see any opportunities for that at the moment. In our stake, we were very fortunate in our stake, the Coventry stake, the stake presidency there were very open-minded, and they wanted to create open forums, and we had those running for about five years. There's just been a change of stake presidency, and the new stake presidency are not. They're not keen on them. So that was an opportunity to have discussion. But there is very little opportunity to have discussion with senior church members, and so to kind of get your point across. The only thing you can do is to talk to your stake president and then hope that the stake president will take it further up the line. Some will, some won't, I suppose.
Okay, thank you.
I couldn't raise my daughter in the church. This was a lady baptized at the age of 8. She left the church aged 29 in 2021. And also, me and my family found it so nice to spend time together as a family and not attending church. This is a lady baptized at age 8. She left the church aged 48 in 2018. So this category from the research was effect upon children and family. And the questions that I posed were, for a church that places so much emphasis on raising eternal families in it, shouldn't statements like the one above, which form part of the reason why they left, make us stop and think? Shouldn't church leaders reflect on what more can be done to make sure no one feels that way? To spend time together as a family would seem to be something the church would and does advocate. However, for this person, why did it only start working for them when they left the church? Why did they have to leave the church before family time started to be so nice? What was it about their church experience that made them feel that way, and what can the church do to change these outcomes? So these were the questions that were attached to the report that I sent out. And the church leader asked me to suggest answers. These are my suggested answers. Certainly amongst those who have left, there is a perception that the church's children and youth safeguarding practices are not strong enough. They've recently been upgraded in the UK with the introduction of DBS checks. Do this, or the equivalent, in every country. Find and implement the best practices worldwide. Change the perception. Raise the church and its reputation around the world to the gold plate standard in safeguarding children and young people. There is a very negative perception that the church cares more about preserving its image than it does about putting abuse victims front and centre. Change this perception by updating all abuse helpline advice, leading with, quote, immediately report the abuse to the appropriate authorities, close quote. Curtin McConkey's priority is, they're the lawyers for the church. Curtin McConkey's priority is to protect its clients' corporate and reputational interests, but they don't always align with Jesus Christ and his teachings.
I think that's down to the bishop to do that. Their job is actually that to actually give legal advice. You know, that what is the best advice legally. The bishop then interprets that on the legal side of it. But when it comes to looking after the victim, it's the bishop's decision and how he looks after the victim. I mean, that advice, yeah, but looking after the victim is a priority as far as the bishop's concerned. I mean, but everybody doesn't see that, as you say. But that's how it should be.
And there are kind of too many court cases revolving around bishops not kind of doing some of those things. And that, yeah.
I think the other thing as well is that the Catholic moved it from internal sort of how can I put it,
systems,
of what happens to an external body that actually, and that's what we need to do. We really do need to move it from just an internal sort of operation to an external operation, monitoring everything. Are everybody correctly trained? Are everybody controlled? You know, and so once we do that, it will become the same as the Catholics, because the Catholics have become, rather than being very closed and secretive, now become very open and sort of transparent. And we need to do that as a church.
Sorry to interrupt. There's some good news on that front. That 21st Century Saints, one of the podcasters, one of whom is Sarah, who has professional experience in safeguarding, that they have been facilitating a closer relationship between the church and its lawyers and external charities and agencies that do that. So there's a big hope now that that relationship will grow. and that kind of advice coming from professional organisations, and with it perhaps some scrutiny can start to happen. So
Fantastic.
totally agree with you. I just wanted to share that there are little baby steps happening towards that now.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
That's wonderful.
that's only just starting to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I was also thinking that once you have reported it to the police or authorities, in a sense, it's out of the bishop's hands in that sense. Then it becomes an external investigation. In addition, on this particular subject, I suggested have senior church leaders talk more in general conference about the child and youth interviews that bishops and others conduct. Explain that these are crucial linchpin touch points and that they must be conducted with a very light touch. These are all about love and Jesus Christ and how much he loves the individual, no matter who they are, how they identify, or what they have done. These interviews are primarily opportunities to answer questions, not ask them. Bishops should be instructed that they should not ask about masturbation or any intimate questions of a sexual nature. Quote, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. The main thing in the church is love and Jesus Christ. This particular quote is often attributed to Stephen R. Covey, but a lot of people think it actually originated with Henry Ford. I'm a member of, in my ward, I'm a counsellor in the bishopric. And the bishop asks me to do interviews from time to time. And I've kind of said to him, and he's completely in agreement with it, that I'm not going to do an interview with just a child on their own. I'll always do it with a parent or some other guardian in the room.
And has that, just for protecting yourself legally, that should be bog standard and definitely isn't in the church, sadly. Do you feel?
It is becoming more.
Do you think people are waking up to sort of that really is more sensible?
We are waking up.
Yeah.
Slowly.
Yeah. No, that's good too. Yeah.
You're not the only church with a problem though.
Yeah.
After studying polygamy, I decided God really thought that men were more important or didn't love his daughters. After studying polygamy, I went on to study church history and found out that so much of what I had been taught was only seen through the church's lens and wasn't actually correct. Close quote. This is from a lady baptized at the age of 8. She left the church aged 32 in 2014. So under this fifth topic, these are the questions. Would it be helpful if the church were to further clarify its position about plural marriage? Even go as far as it did with race and the priesthood and issue a similar disavowal? Would such a declaration go some way toward healing the woundedness that so many people, particularly women, have felt because of polygamy and its legacy? And these are my suggestions to church leaders. The doctrine of plural marriage has left a long legacy of confusion and hurt and looms large in the reasoning for people to still leave the church today. Senior church leaders should acknowledge this fact and explain clearly all the legacy ramifications of the practice, so that members are crystal clear that in the next life they won't be in a plural marriage. Or will they? Leaders should issue a clear disavowal of the doctrine. In her book, The Ghost of Eternal Polygamy, Carolyn Pearson helpfully suggests a form of words that the church could use. She says, quote, today the church disavows the theories and practices advanced in the past that a polygamous marriage is essential or advantageous for the highest level of exaltation. Issuing this, or a like-worded disavowal, would go a long way towards healing the woundedness that so many people feel, particularly women, because of this practice. I also suggested senior church leaders should look at a particular clause in the Handbook of Instructions. Handbook of Instructions, Sealing Children to Parents, 38.4.2.1, which says, children who are born in the covenant, children who are born after their mother has been sealed to a husband in a temple are born in the covenant of that sealing. They do not need to receive the ordinance of sealing to parents. Sometimes a woman who has been sealed to a man later has children with another man. when this occurs, these children are born into the covenant of the first sealing, unless they were born after the sealing was cancelled or after it was withdrawn due to resignation or withdrawal of church membership. This policy, I'm saying, this policy causes some people to leave the church. They do not believe that children born under the circumstances described above should be sealed to another man who is not their father. This should be changed. Interestingly, since I sent that back in October of 2023, they have changed the wording. Instead of saying first sealing, it now says, what does it say? Most recent, I think. I think it's the most recent sealing. So, slight change. The LDS Church is a stifling and harmful space for women. They are shamed from pursuing autonomous, productive lives and are reduced to a limited, stereotypical role, lacking individual identity or options for life choices. Women have zero decision-making capacity in any context in the church, being excluded from any governing quorum, resulting in male-privileged church policies, doctrines and practices that badly impact women, close quote. This is a lady baptized aged 8, left church aged 65 in 2020. So this is under the category of women. Questions from me: isn't it a monumental loss to the church that women's voices are not part of every decision-making moment? Wouldn't the church be immensely benefited if over half of its global membership had a representative decision-making voice in the senior councils of the church? My suggestions. It is clear from its history that the place women have in the church has been progressively eroded, their decision-making, budget control and degree of independence all marginalised since the days of Joseph Smith. Church leaders should expand the current priesthood role women play in the temple across the board to all other aspects of church service, administration and decision-making. Women should be appointed to serve in every council and meeting in the church on a 50-50 basis with men. And this is a reference to the words that Joseph Smith used at the initial meetings of the Relief Society in 1842. He talks about being ordained and talks about the authority conferred upon them, talks about the keys of the kingdom being given to them. I now turn the key to you in the name of God, and this society shall rejoice, and knowledge and intelligence shall flow down from this time. This is the beginning of better days to this society.
The church leaders have been talking a lot about making sure women are included in councils at a kind of a ward and state level.
Yes.
Although they're obviously not in the ultimate decision-making presidencies. But it seems they're not really practicing it themselves, when occasionally people have been able to kind of ask women on the Relief Society board or the new women who are kind of at a level working with area presidencies that's been pioneered here in Europe. The actual number of meetings they have with them is a very, very few, it seems, and it's usually one apostle who's been delegated to interact with the primary leadership or the Relief Society leadership. So, you know, again, it's this frustration of people at the very top not practicing what they're preaching to everyone else. Do you think this could be, but I'll frame it as a question, do you think this can be achieved while not giving women ordination to the priesthood?
I think it can be achieved, yes.
What would that look like as a model?
I think it's simply the bishops invite the Relief Society president into every bishopric meeting. And at the senior level, the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 Apostles invite the Relief Society presidency into every single meeting, so that at least they have their input. They don't have to agree with everything that comes up because they don't agree amongst themselves anyway. And so it's, but I think that would be really helpful, really helpful. Church leadership.
And sorry, and I would just say possibly much more likely to actually be formalised than ordaining women as things go at the moment.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, as we know in the community of Christ, and we have some community of Christ people here today and this weekend, although it caused quite a ruffle in their church back in the sort of late 80s or early 90s when they started to ordain women into the church. Nevertheless, that's what they have done, and so that they have women at all levels, and the president of the Church of Community of Christ is a lady now.
Yeah.
So church leaders should be aware of and guard against historical revisionism, wherein individual church leaders or leader councils in the past have altered historical documents either in error or to suit their patriarchal purposes. The above footnote reference, the one we saw before, is a case in point where the original reads, "I now turn the key to you, and this is the beginning of better days to this society." And it was changed to, "I now turn the key in your behalf, and this is the beginning of better days to the poor and needy." This change got into the church manuscript history, 1854, 1856, and has remained in prominence and influence from then until recently with the publication of the Nauvoo Relief Society Minute Book, 1842, 1844. Senior church leaders should consult with senior women leaders on everything, particularly on things pertaining to families. The Family Proclamation is a case in point. This goes back to 1995, where, according to a member of the General Relief Society president, the diminutive Japanese lady, Cheiko
Izuki, was it?
Can't remember. Yeah, something like that. She said, no consultation took place with the General Relief Society presidency prior to the 1995 release. And so that's a very interesting case study, isn't it? Because this was a proclamation on the family. And the family takes in everybody. But the brethren at the time decided not to consult with the General Relief Society presidency. So they didn't get any input before they created it. So it was all written by men and from the male perspective only. God was cruel and abusive and manipulative. This is from a female baptized at age 8, left church age 36 in 2020. So is she reflecting how she felt the church had shaped that perception? Is she saying that her experience as a church member formed her stated conclusion? And if so, why is there such a disconnect between the declared doctrines of the church regarding the nature of God and this person's lived experience? The church teaches that God is love, that all love, all good, and everything that is beautiful emanates from God. So how to this person had God become cruel, abusive, and manipulative? We won't ever know the answers to all these questions because they're private and personal to this person, but surely this must cause us to pause, think, and ask, what do we need to do to make sure nobody ever feels like this towards God again? In the church, how do we make sure everyone feels the love of God and feels completely safe in their lived church experience? My suggestion is senior church leaders should publicly acknowledge that a member's perception of God is partially, maybe substantially influenced and shaped by the church they attend. Further acknowledge that some members' perceptions are very negative because of the negative experiences they've had in the church. Acknowledge that they have been hurt, bruised, and battered by the very church that was supposed to deliver nothing but the main thing. Going back to the previous quote, love and the healing that Jesus Christ brings. Moving on. No, not moving on. Staying with this. Additionally, senior leaders need to acknowledge that members' negative perceptions of God often result from the way they perceive local leaders have behaved towards them. When love is not spoken here at the local level, so much pain can be inflicted. Better training is needed to help local and general leaders put Christ before the handbook. Use the plural deity term heavenly parents rather than the singular form of heavenly father. Have senior church leaders teach this in general conference by explaining that the Hebrew word Elohim is plural, meaning gods or godhood. This will foster a more liberating attitude towards Heavenly Mother, which in turn will uplift the whole church membership, for sure, half of it. Moving on. November 2015 policy was a big one. Christ would never have done that. Male baptized at the age of 8, left church age 49 in 2020. Out of the 111 people who responded to this research in 2023, the vast majority, something like 87%, were women, but there were a few men as well. This is one of the men. So this is about how they perceived Jesus Christ. Like the God category before, this one also illustrates the gap between the church's desired results and outcomes and, for some people, actual results and outcomes. After all, the stated aims of the church include, quote, the mission of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is to help all of God's children come to Jesus Christ through learning about his gospel, making and keeping promises with God, covenants, and practicing Christ-like love and service. So my questions were, why do so many people believe that the church fails to deliver or is not delivering for them what the church clearly believes it does deliver? Why in these people's minds is there such a disconnect? Senior church leaders should be very careful in declaring something as revelation. It is said that in the ex-Mormon community, that more people left the church over the 2015-2019 policy changes being declared a revelation than at any other time. Referring back to the section on women earlier, it would be very interesting to understand to what extent the 2015 policy change was discussed beforehand with any of the senior women leaders. Church leaders at all levels should follow the maxim, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. The main thing is love and Jesus Christ. Senior church leaders should publicly apologize for causing some members to feel that they could no longer see Christ in the church and felt that they had no alternative but to leave. Well, and also desist from the follow the prophet mantra. A much better informed membership knows now that all prophets are fallible men who have made, do make, and will make mistakes. And this oft-repeated phrase has achieved hollow ring status. Put all the emphasis on following the Saviour, which, to be perfectly fair, they are certainly putting much more emphasis on the Saviour. He is the only person who won't let you down. We honour, love, and sustain our prophets, but we must not hang on their every word. I felt the policies were exclusive and judgmental, the cultural is toxic and unhealthy environment, the religion as a whole brought a lot of people who lack true independent thought and where questions or a different view of spirituality was met with condemnation. This was a lady aged 8, baptized at 8, left church aged 32 in 2020. So this is about culture. So is cultural Mormonism the problem, or are there deeper issues afoot? How easy is it to entirely separate doctrine and culture? The two get so entwined in our everyday thinking and practices. Senior church leaders should engage in some general cultural detoxification practices, hold discussions or give talks around what is doctrine and what is cultural practice. Disposing of a few myths, such as serving a full-time mission as some kind of saving ordinance, would be a good start. Old cultural practices still live on in the minds of many members, such as men shaving off their beards to serve as stake president, women not wearing slacks on Sundays, or men in white shirts. All cultural dinosaurs should be addressed in general conference and be allowed to retire gracefully.
I think that's a really good principle for a lot of things. I think we have a problem where so many things have evolved over time, and we've all heard, especially if we get to our age, several different versions or opinions on different things taught as the truth. And we don't have a system for retiring doctrines, for retiring ideas, for actually formally telling the people we no longer practice that or we've got better.
Yeah.
And in a way, that should be fine, I think, within the Mormon context. If we are learning line upon line, precept on precept, that also means you have to unlearn some things because we do better, we get better at it. So I definitely feel that can be framed within the Mormon cultural paradigm. But it opens so many cans of worms, you could understand their reluctance, because it always boils down to admitting that prophets taught something as from God and they were wrong. And they work with that a lot, and they're nuancing it now with, well, that was then, or they were speaking as a man, or they were speaking as a product of their time. But that shouldn't be the case with someone speaking for God who said they were speaking for God at the time. And that's the Rubicon that all of these things point to ultimately, or a lot of them, I think.
Difficult for them.
Yeah.
This is a quote from a lady who was baptized at 8, left the church at age 51 in 2019. My children were being harmed mentally by the church. So this is the last slide. I think it might be one more. These are the questions. If you felt your children were being harmed mentally by your church, wouldn't you leave it too? Senior church leaders should evaluate all policies and procedures to identify and remove all harmful elements of church doctrine and practice. Eliminate toxic perfectionism and emphasize that failing is an integral part of the learning process. Change all full-time missions from proselyting and teaching to being service-based only. Under the direction of President M. Russell Bauer, Mission President Jeff Strong, I think this is the same guy.
Yeah.
We spoke about yesterday, Peter. Jeff Strong ran a 2-year pilot in the Bentonville, Arkansas mission from 2019 to 2021. He says baptisms, so he stopped all proselyting, and all they did was service projects. He says baptisms increased, but more importantly, the number of missionaries on mental health care watch went from 40 pre-pilot to just 2 years later. I think that's a very telling finding. And what else? Initiate, this kind of goes to what we were talking about earlier maybe. Initiate bottom-up, listen to understand discussion circles in every ward where bishops ask ward members what changes they would like to see the church make to become a more Christ-like organization. Bishops would then feed back to stake presidents, who feed back up the line to the first presidency, the quorum of 12. An alternative means of doing this would be to create direct online pathways, enabling members to express concerns about issues and make suggestions to an expanded office of the first presidency. Provide the same growth and development opportunities for girls as there are for boys, including passing the sacrament. This comes up because the section on the Doctrine and Covenants relating to passing the sacrament doesn't specify a priesthood office is required. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. Any questions? Anything anybody would like to say? Any complaints? Please, I'm open to all complaints and questions and anything you hate. Including me. If you hate me, that's fine. That's perfectly fine.
It feels painful sitting here with people who are friends of mine, in the church, who we've done so much to try and build each other's faith and testimony and to serve in the church, but to honestly acknowledge that in amongst all the good, there is so much really very significant harm being done, and one of the themes that's emerged so far in a lot of the discussions this weekend has already been the church could be very different for different people. For some people, it saves their life. It saves them from loneliness, from addiction, from having no purpose in life. And a lot of us, even who've become a bit more disillusioned with things later, have very much appreciated it as stepping stones along the way, that it has given us a lot of good, as well as we're hearing from these people who left. Ultimately, they calculated it's doing more harm than good, or now in my life I can't do it anymore. So it is hard to hear. And in a culture of toxic positivity, we don't know how to have those conversations, usually in church culture, unless you've got a very rare dynamic of a few leaders who are willing to do that and a bit more open-minded. So it can feel so like, yes, obviously, yes. Why weren't we doing this 50 years ago? All of it. And people were saying this 50 years ago. This is, in a sense, the key reasons these problems arise. But the struggle to actually get those conversations to happen and for people with power to listen. My solution is the church's one. We have to have common consent, scrutiny and voting on every major policy or doctrine issue. That would immediately force those conversations to happen because they would have to be persuasive. And I feel Doctrine and Covenants 121 is very clear about that. It talks about leadership not by referring to your authority. That doesn't work. Your priesthood disappears. But by gentle persuasion. And that means you have to be persuasive. You have to win the arguments.
Love unfeigned.
Yes,
kindness,
yes, yeah.
without hypocrisy.
Yeah. So I guess my thought is, although it seems so vicious and so hard and so many, the list is endless. The reason I'm still in this space is, as a 14-year-old, I was taught to memorize section 121, which already has the solutions.
Yeah.
That it has the answers. We don't have to leave Mormonism and our best scriptures in order to fix this, in order to create the space to have these conversations. It's there, and they taught it to me when I was 14, and I'm so frustrated that they can't see it. But we keep trying, and
Sure.
people talk about it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. That was, wow. Yeah.
No applause is necessary.
No, it's very necessary.
No,
That was
very
really
good.
powerful.
Very good. A lot of work gone into that.
Yeah.